Good morning, everybody. It is 10:30 by Apple time rather than the County Council clock. County Council clock sometimes deviates a little. I don't know what it says behind me. Welcome to Lincolnshire County Council Planning and Regulation Committee. It's the 5th of December. I'm Councillor Ian Fleetwood. I know we may well have one or two people watching us on the internet or wherever. To my immediate right, I've got my Vice Chairman, Councillor Charlotte Vernon. To my right-hand side, I have members of the committee who will be dealing with applications. To my left, I've got a couple of visiting councillors who've come to speak to applications. And at the very far side, I have a highways officer. Good morning. We've had the fire alarms in the building this morning, so if you hear a fire alarm, please exit the building to the rear of me and congregate in the car park at the front on Newland, where we will hopefully account for everybody. There is no anticipated fire or alarm this morning, so please exit the building as and when. I think everybody knows where the fire exits are. Water's available at the rear of the meeting if anybody should like it. Similarly, I think there is a coffee machine if everybody knows where it is. So I think that deals with the technicalities of how the meeting might be operated. Item 1 is apologies replacement members, and I know that Councillor Mrs Overton hasn't made it, so we have apologies, and we have one or two others as well.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have apologies from Councillor Mrs Overton, Councillor Pepper and Councillor Reid.
I will say to people, please put your phones on silent ring, because mine's just going like crazy at the moment, so I'll just ignore that. Declarations of interest is item 2. Does anybody wish to declare? I've made one or two declarations with regard to informal declarations with regard to the 5C parking zone, in that I have a couple of friends in that vicinity, but it doesn't preclude me from voting or conducting the meeting in that zone. What the scheme will not directly affect them, I don't think. Anybody else wish to declare anything? Seeing none, thank you. Item 3 then is the minutes of the 7th of November. That's the previous site meeting in the council chamber. These have previously been circulated. As chairman, I'm quite happy to move them. Councillor Hall is putting his hand up, wishing to second, and Councillor Noy is putting her hand up. Are you wishing to second or speak to? Second, thank you. Okay, so all in favour, please show. Would anybody like to talk to those minutes at all? Give you a chance. No. Okay, thank you. I'll move you on to item 4 then, and we did have a site visit to look at zone 5C, and that was held on the 17th of November. Those minutes also have been circulated. I'm quite happy to move them. Comment from my Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. In the minutes of the site visit meeting, it incorrectly states that I was present. Unfortunately, I wasn't due to illness, so could that be amended, please, prior to the minutes being approved? Thank you.
Thank you. So with that amendment, Councillor Mrs Austin.
I did not attend the site visit, and I just don't know if members are aware, but no one told me of the date. We left it as something after this meeting, last meeting, and I wasn't informed of a changed date. Thank you.
I think that after the meeting, it was arranged by Highways to organise a date. There was a little bit of plotting of diary, and there was an email sent out with regard to the meeting. I received that email, and I did see a list of other people. I didn't check to see if the full committee was on that list, but if you're saying you didn't receive it, I'll apologise. I don't know if it might have gone into a spam folder or whatever on your computer, I don't know. But okay, point taken. So quite happy to move those minutes. Everyone's happy. Okay, We'll move you on then to item 5, which is traffic items 5.1 West Willoughby A153. We're going to take an officer introduction, and I believe Councillor Wootton would also like to speak to this application in a moment too.
Thank you, Chairman. So, this first report relates to a proposal for a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit on the A153 between West Willoughby and Ancaster. The request was received from the Parish Council for a reduction here, and as there is limited development, it's been assessed as a rural limit and did in fact meet the requirements for a rural speed limit in terms of accident rate. The speed surveys indicated on the next slide, please, show a mean speed of 45 miles per hour, which defines it as a borderline case in accordance with the speed limit policy, and therefore I'm seeking, as stated in the recommendation, that the committee approves the proposed 40-mile-an-hour limit so that we can bring it into effect and carry out the necessary consultations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll move on to Councillor Wootton, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Mr Chairman, the campaign to reduce the speed limit to 40 has been ongoing since 2009. Although the report today is supported by district councillors and the parish council, councillors and residents feel that the area proposed should include the adjacent village of West Willoughby. At the moment, you have a strange case of traffic entering a village at 50 mile an hour, increasing then to 60 mile an hour, then dropping to 40 mile an hour, and then to 30 mile per hour. A calculation of the West Willoughby density in line with Lincolnshire speed limit policy results in 25 points and therefore meets the requirements for a 40 mile an hour speed limit. There is also a bus stop on the bend Sleaford bound number 27, which includes the school bus. The Rookery Lane junction also bus discharges over 30 children. You can see, Rachel, if I can picture please.
I will allow you some extra time, Councillor Wootton. I can see the clock's ticking, but I can see the IT's
Yes,
just catching up with you.
Just saying, Mr Chairman, there is a bus stop on the bed in Sleaford bound, number 27, which includes the school bus. The Rookery Lane junction bus discharges over 30 children. You can see that there is an incline in the road before West Willoughby, and there have been several RTAs at this junction. It does not have a street light, but it's also hazardous for children crossing the road. Add to this, slow-moving, heavily laden HGVs will be exiting from a new quarry onto the A153. Villagers support this request for 40 mile an hour limit, and I request the committee approve this for consultation today. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
I'm therefore going to open this to committee. I know that this one's been in the mill for a little while. In fact, I can remember quite a few years ago we did actually have a site visit out to this location, and I'm talking about many years ago. I seem to have been on this committee quite some time now. Having said all that, I do support what the officers are telling us, and I do support the recommendation. I hear the local member talking in terms of different speed limits. Potentially it could be something that could be revisited in the future, but I think it's important that we put into place this restriction now as a baseline, and then move forwards, and if there's something to be done a little further along, whether it's an extension or a revision, let's see where we go at that point. So I'm quite happy to move the recommendation. Behind me, Councillor Skinner.
I know the area, Chair, and I'm very happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Mrs Austin.
Thank you. I've no issue with the actual principle, but there's something in the wording of the report on page 11 which says the accident rate has been calculated at 42. Well, whether I'm being a pedantic mathematician, I don't know, but a rate means something out of something. So what actually does the accident rate calculated at 42 mean, please? It's meaningless to me. Is it the speed at which vehicles are going, or 42 out of what? Can someone help me, please?
Thank you, Councillor Austin. In the speed limit policy, the rural limits are identified via calculation of an accident rate based on the volume of vehicular traffic against the number of accidents over a given length, and that gives us that score. And we need at least 35 to be able to justify a limit.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, the application is therefore proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Skinner. All in favour, please show now. And this is obviously people that can vote, and I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much. I will point out that Councillor Dilks is here, but he's a visiting member, and as such cannot be afforded a vote this morning. So thank you for that. Moving on then to 5.2 Spalding. This is the A158 Windsover Road proposed puffing crossing facility. Officer introduction, please.
Thank you. This report relates to a request by the late Councillor Newton for us to assess the existing zebra crossing on the A151 Windsover Road at Spalding. Next slide, please. So it lies on the A151 on the western route out of the town centre. Next slide, please. The existing zebra lies between two junctions and outside a convenience store and links pedestrians to both sides of the road in terms of this store and the residential areas. Next slide, please. A survey was carried out in May at this location and the score of 1.31 was achieved. This falls short of that required for a puffing crossing, which is 1.2. But in that policy it states that where a score is within 10% of the score required for a facility, this committee may approve it. So the recommendation is that this committee approves the submission of a funding bid for feasibility study design and installation of a puffing crossing at this location. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no speakers to this application, so I'll therefore open it to committee. I do know Spalding reasonably well. I do know this location. I support the proposed puffing crossing facility. Certainly, road safety is paramount, I think, across Lincolnshire. So I think the numbers stack up, and obviously we need to take this one forwards. Would anybody else like to speak? Certainly I need a second. Councillor Carrington. I hope you're declaring the fact that Carrington Road is just beside this crossing.
Moving on from nominative determinism, I just would like to second that, Chairman. I note the matter of the scores. However, I also note that there is high density housing on both sides of the road. It is an A road, and we can see from the photograph up there, there is a community shop immediately opposite one end of the crossing as well. As you say, Chairman, pedestrian safety must be paramount, so I'm very happy to second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Austin.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Yes, I'd be happy to support this. I mean, that it's currently a busy road. I think this will be one that will be relieved when the western bypass is built, but it's not just cars, it's HGVs and so on. So I think this is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Carrington, that this one goes forward with regard to the funding bid, feasibility study, design and installation of a puffing crossing. All in favour, please show now. That again is unanimous. Thank you. I will ask for anybody against, any abstentions. Everybody's happy. Thank you. Now we move to Lincoln, 5.3. Proposed permit scheme, parking scheme, Zone 5C. This one was the one that we went to the site visit to last month. I would encourage only the people who went on the site visit to vote with regard to this, just to make sure that we are fully legal and everybody has the appropriate information in front of them. Councillor, Mrs. Austin,
I did check up on that point and I was advised I could vote. I may not choose to, but I was advised. Thank you.
You are fully aware of the scheme, I agree, but I would encourage people, if they are not familiar with the area, to remove any doubt from any part of decision making, that they do look at their own issues. So we just make sure that everyone's happy. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to say that I'm in a similar position to Councillor Austin, but I did have a look at this because it is just round the corner from the County Council, so I have had a good look and I will be voting.
Okay, thank you. So I'll therefore go back to the officers. Jan, if you can introduce the report, please.
Thank you. So this report relates to the previous report brought to the last meeting on proposed introduction of permit parking in Sinsel Bank, identified as Zone 5C. Next slide, please. So this scheme has been justified against LCC guidelines and gained sufficient support from residents. However, 17 objections were received, and these are detailed at Appendix C of this report. Officers' comments acknowledge the concerns raised by objectors and clarified the position on the issues raised. It's also provided some background on how the scheme potentially will contribute to future environmental improvements within the area. At the meeting in November, members resolved to visit Sinsel Bank, and this took place on the 17th of November. There were discussions that followed regarding the impact on residents in terms of additional costs of the scheme to residents, the effect on visitors and access for carers, and whether the scheme is still genuinely required at this time. Next slide, please. Given that the criteria have been met for a scheme here, the recommendation remains that the objections are overruled and that the scheme as advertised is introduced, and that, as requested at the previous meeting, there is a proposed amendment to remove the sections of double yellow line shown on this slide at Sibthorpe Street and Scorer Street, so that the existing single yellow line is retained and will allow parking by residents in the evenings and on Sundays. Thank you.
Thank you. So therefore, I don't know, Councillor Kelly, would you like to comment? I'll give you an opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. I'd just like to justify why I'm here today. So I've represented Sinsel Bank since May 2017. During this time, I've been involved in the regeneration project and know the area and members of the community well. The regeneration vision, which has evolved over time, aims to improve the quality of life for residents in terms of environmental and levelling up objectives, both of which are national government policy. Residents' parking is one of the stepping stones forward towards the residents reclaiming their neighbourhood. And there are three main strands which justify the scheme to go ahead. So my point number one, there is support for residents' parking from local residents, given that there are some objections, but it's overwhelmingly supported, and ward councillors. During the formal consultation period, the process undertaken, resident parking 64% of respondents in the areas gave their support. Also, the neighbourhood office, which is on Portland Street, regularly receives requests of when residents' parking is going to be actually installed. So there's widespread interest and support, and it's a continuing thing. The second point to consider is the vision for the area in the future, and I really stress this because this is fundamental. Residents' parking is part of a much bigger scheme that is following after. We need to move commuters out of the area and reduce the volume of cars using Sincilbank as a rat run. By this we mean that motorists use it as a shortcut to get from the High Street to Cannock Road and Pelham Bridge and vice versa. We want residents to reclaim the streets, to get their neighbourhood back and for it not to be used as a shortcut all the time. The scheme, and this is important as well, to follow is the town deal, which is part of the government's levelling up policy for deprived areas. This will see streets reconfigured to stop rat runs, create more green space and the creation of a green corridor with priority given to pedestrians and cyclists. This will remove congestion, improve air quality and generally improve the quality of life for residents. The final point is that we have made a commitment to deliver the town deal for Sincilbank. And when I say we, I mean LCC. If the scheme doesn't remove commuter traffic from the area, this would create difficulties for LCC because the outcome of the town deal is actually reported to central government. So they're my 3 points, which actually are really fundamental. So I just want, I know I've gone over time, but basically residents' parking is the first stepping stone to looking towards the future and regenerating the area. So it's part of a much greater strategy. Thank you. Thank you for letting me go over as well.
I think it's an important issue. It's an important issue for Lincoln. It's an important issue for local residents, and it's an important issue with regard to obviously the 2 schemes are interlinked. Both 5C and 5D do have a knock-on effect. So I appreciate some of your comments did respond to 5D as well, but I will give you another opportunity should you wish on the 5D application. Okay, so any comment from the officers? No? Okay, so I'll therefore go to committee. Obviously, we started off at the community centre on Portland Street with regard to our site visit. It was a wet day. We did see a presentation there. There was an opportunity to go and wander through the streets and to see exactly how bad the car parking was. So we go from there. Would anybody that attended like to comment with regard to the site visit or any part of? Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It was incredibly useful to go and have a look as part of that site visit and go and see this part of Lincoln. And really useful this morning to hear from Councillor Kelly as the local member. I did have concerns and a degree of scepticism in respect of this scheme, which is why I was as keen as everyone else to go and have a look and take into account that local part of Lincoln. I mean, I would say that I still have a degree of scepticism, not least that there are going to be several hundred households across this part of Lincoln who are now going to be paying either £26 or £78 for parking that they have currently enjoyed for no charge at all. And I am also concerned that there seems to be a sense of mission creep with what started off in a scheme that we heard a few months ago on the other side of High Street, now covering by increments the whole of this section of Lincoln across the foot of Pelham Bridge. And I wonder whether there would have been genuine enthusiasm and democratic consent across all of this area if the whole scheme had been put out there at once. But obviously, by beginning in the way that has already begun, effectively, the necessity, since you start with resident parking in one area, and simply the problem pushes out and pushes out and pushes out until we're in the situation where we are. But appreciating that clearly City of Lincoln are very keen, and local member who understand this area better than myself are keen for this to happen, then I'm quite happy, Mr. Chairman, to move the paper as it's recommended.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Jan, do you want to comment at all? Are you happy? Okay, right. Okay, so I'm quite happy to second the paper. Thank you, Councillor Ashton. As you quite rightly say, the Lincoln City Council are quite happy for this scheme to go forwards. The local member, the local county council member, is also happy to see this go forwards. There will potentially be a pressure for non-local cars, for people commuting or for people shopping, not to park in this zone. Obviously, the extension of the residents' parking scheme, etc., should make it easier for local residents, homeowners in the area, to park closer to their properties and remove any of the parking that comes from away. But it must also be recognised that any of the alien cars that come into the area that currently do, quite rightly, if they have tax, MOT, insurance, can park on the highway, will have to find alternate locations, and that effect might be to ripple to another zone. Okay, anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. My concerns are similar in many respects to Councillor Ashton's, especially on the issue of mission creep. I can foresee a problem, and although I am not speaking for anybody other than myself, I can foresee an issue that what you will find in years come by is that these zones extend throughout basically the entirety of the centre of Lincoln, as they do in other cities. Now, if you are physically able, then that's not so bad. If you're not, that makes things very difficult. Lincoln is already a very difficult place to use if you aren't physically able. I speak from personal experience on this. I take what the local member has said, and on that basis I will support the application on the basis of what Councillor Killy has said, but I do have serious concerns that this is the first step into a very long line of mission creep, and we are going to be seeing more of these zones pop up and similar issues arise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? And I see nobody, so I am going to offer it to the vote. Proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by myself, Councillor Fleetwood. The objections are overruled. The scheme as advertised be introduced. All in favour, please show now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anybody against? Any abstentions? 1, 2, 4, 2, 4, 5. Okay, that is therefore carried, and that scheme will be introduced. I'll therefore move you on to item 5.4, which is a scheme alongside this, which is Zone 5D. So if I can take an officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So whereas Zone 5C covers the area of Sincilbank to the west of Sincilbank Drain, Zone 5D proposes permit parking throughout the larger area to the east of the drain. Next slide, please. Again, this zone has been subject to the surveys of available curbside parking space and resident support, and subsequently a permit scheme could be justified. Like Zone 5C, the reduction in traffic movements and on-street parking would result from such a scheme will support the City of Lincoln Council's investment in the regeneration of this area and future highways improvement works. So if the scheme were to go in, permit bays would be available to permit holders from Monday to Friday between 8 AM and 6 PM, along with their unlimited use of the limited waiting bays. 32 objections have been received, which are summarised at Appendix C in the report, along with officers' comments. Again, there are concerns around the cost to residents, effect on local businesses, parking difficulties for carers and visitors to the area, and potential reduction in overall parking provision. Next slide, please. A number of minor modifications are proposed to address some of the specific issues raised, and these are at Chelmsford Street. Additional permit holder bays are proposed to replace the existing double yellow lines on the south side. At Hope Street, additional permit holder bay is proposed on the west side to replace proposed double yellow lines. Next slide, please. At the eastern end of Portland Street, it is proposed to replace the proposed permit holder only bays on both sides at the eastern end with dual 2-hour limited waiting bays. This would still be available to permit holders for an unlimited period. The request for additional double yellow lines on Scorer Street at its junction with Bishop King Street were considered but are not recommended, as they would adversely affect residents. So given that the criteria for the permit scheme to cover Zone 5D has met the necessary criteria, the recommendation is that the objections are overruled and the scheme is introduced as advertised, to include the minor modifications proposed at Chelmsford Street, Hope Street and Portland Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can just hear an alarm going. I think I think we know where it's coming from, so I think that one's no problem. So we've got that one, so that's no problem. Okay, so it's been introduced. This one hasn't been subject to a site visit, so obviously committee can debate accordingly. It's the scheme alongside the last scheme that we've seen. There has been minor modifications on Chelmsford Street, Hope Street and Portland Street according to Appendix D. So I'll draw your attention to those. Would anybody like to speak? Councillor Ashton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to repeat everything that I said in relation to 5.3, as many of those comments I think are just as applicable to 5.4. I would re-emphasise that when you look at the slightly lower public support for this application, that it does feel that the further out these schemes go, the less support that there is for them. And I appreciate there's been elements of this that have been consulted on and then reconsulted in respect of the finalised boundaries, which, looking at page 54, is suggesting 60% support. This is hardly a ringing endorsement for a scheme of this nature, as extensive as what this is, and which is going to come with a clear cost burden for families in this area. And I would note it further that on one of the predecessor schemes, that support was only at 57%. So this is really, really marginal. And I would encourage that for future rollouts of these schemes, that the whole thing might be looked at before we're doing sort of A, B, C and D and covering such an extensive area, because I really do see that there is, this isn't clear cut in terms of public support. It's marginally in favour, but as previously, I'm happy to follow the guidance of City of Lincoln colleagues and the local member who know this area and the people there better than myself.
So you've therefore moved the paper. Obviously, we've just dealt with the 5C and we've talked in terms of the ripple effect. So currently, as the data stands, this is as the system works at the moment. Inevitably, there could be some parking that's now going to move from 5C that could come towards this zone, which will put pressure onto it. So I think that on the basis that the data stacks up, as the scheme is currently proposed, I think that given the future usage and potential that other people might want to park in this zone, it might well have an influence. On the top right corner is Pelham Bridge, and I do know quite a few people do park, if you like, this end of Pelham Bridge and walk across the bridge into town. So it is no great distance to walk over the bridge and be into the pedestrianised precinct of the town. So I think there is an influence in the cross street area and in that sort of zone, which might also be increased given the fact that 5C has been put into place, and in addition the proximity to the town centre. So I'm quite happy to second again. Anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing nobody. Therefore proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by myself, that the recommendation as printed is supported. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. That's not quite. Anybody against? Any abstentions? And we have one abstention. So therefore that is also carried. So thank you very much. That scheme will also be put into place. So that basically brings us to the end of the agenda for the morning.